In 146 BC, Rome had successfully usurped the title of dominant power in the Western Mediterranean from the city of Carthage. This was after the Second Punic War. Now, Rome and Carthage had been butting heads for well over a century now, and the hatred for the Carthaginians has once again spurred Rome to attack Carthage. Now, Rome now has Carthage under siege, and the siege is brutal. It lasts for ages. Anyway, so the Romans decide that they need a general from a family that has been fighting the Carthaginians for decades now, and they decide to go to the family of Scipio. Now, the head of the Scipio family during this time is a man called Scipio Alaminus. Now, Scipio, as I said, is part of a long line of noblemen who have been dominant in Roman politics and in the Roman military. Indeed, one of the Scipios had actually defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama. So anyway, rising to the challenge of finally capturing Carthage, Scipio makes his staff out of his family members. One of these family members is his brother-in-law, a man called Tiberius Gracchus. Now, Gracchus descends from a long noble family in Rome that has long held prestige in the Roman Senate. And Tiberius Gracchus wants to follow in his father's footsteps and become a Roman senator, maybe even a Roman consul, you never know. So anyway, the siege of Carthage is continuing to drag on, and eventually Scipio orders a mass assault on the city walls. So in the final days of the siege, Tiberius Gracchus, being a military tribune, is put in charge of a group of Roman soldiers, and he leads one of the first waves against the Carthaginian walls. Now, sufficient to say, Carthage is long past her prime. However, they are still a formidable force. The amount of casualties Rome sustains in this assault is astonishing. Anyway, rallying his men, Tiberius Gracchus climbs up the Roman siege ladders and eventually jumps over the wall. Now, this is a big thing, as he is the first Roman soldier to breach Carthaginian defences. And he breaches the Carthaginian defences so well that his men are able to follow him, and they ransack the city of Carthage. They help open up the gates, and the rest of Scipio's army follows them into Carthage. So Carthage is utterly destroyed by the Romans. They spared no effort in trying to destroy this city. Indeed, Scipio ordered Carthage to be covered with salt so that no plants would grow there. Anyway, recognizing his brother-in-law's achievement, Scipio praises Tiberius in front of his men and actually rewards him for being the first man over the city walls. This, needless to say, is one of the shining moments in Tiberius Gracchus's career, as it singles him out as one of the military tribunes that holds the most promise out of all of the military tribunes. This means that he eventually could potentially become a senator in the Roman Senate. So, anyway, as a reward for his actions, in 137 BC, he is made a quaestor, appointed to the new Roman chief war magistrate, the consul, Maximus. Now, Maximus sets out to Hispania, and the reason for this is that they have just conquered Hispania from the Carthaginians, and the Carthaginians didn't really have Hispania under complete domination. Indeed, for a majority of the time that Hannibal was in Hispania, he was putting down revolts by local rulers, and indeed he had to break through many local rulers in order to get to Italy. So anyway, the new Roman consul attempts to besiege the Hispanic Numantines. This fails in more ways than I can possibly describe. Indeed, the Numantines not only repel the Roman army, but they actually manage to sack a little bit of their camp, steal Tiberius's ledgers, which Tiberius is a bit upset about because he likes reading, and during the consul's retreat, they manage to completely encircle him. So, needless to say, Maximus is a little bit of an inadequate commander. So anyway, the Romans desperately send envoys to the Numantines to let them go, because they are literally stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point. They can't go forwards because the Numantines will kill them, they can't go backwards because the Numantines will kill them, and they can't go to the sides because the Numantines would kill them. So the Numantines refuse these envoys, and they send back a message saying that they will only negotiate with Tiberius. Tiberius, after all, is from a noble Roman family, so Tiberius is a quaestor. He should not be negotiating these sorts of treaties. But the Romans have absolutely no choice. They are going to die if they don't send Tiberius to negotiate with the Numantines. So anyway, Tiberius is warmly welcomed into the Numantines' capital, and after a little bit of negotiating back and forth, they agree to let the Romans go. As an added bonus, they also agree to let Tiberius go through the treasury they have just stolen from the Romans and to take whatever he wants. Tiberius, being the stoic philosopher that he is, only takes back his ledgers and a couple bits of incense for religious purposes. So anyway, Tiberius arrives back in Rome and he is given a hero's welcome by the people. The people, remember, make up the backbone of the Roman army. It's not the elites that are the foot soldiers. They are just the commanders. So anyway, the people celebrate Tiberius as a hero of the people. He has just saved their menfolk. However, Tiberius isn't as warmly received by the Roman Senate. In the Roman Senate's eyes, the treaty that Tiberius made with the Numantines makes Rome look like a bit of a weak and pathetic power. The Senate refuses to ratify Tiberius' treaty, and they actually decide to send Maximus back to the Numantines in chains as a sort of punishment. And Maximus is fully aware that he is a rubbish commander and basically says, "Yeah, I'll go." This fate was going to be Tiberius's as well. However, his brother-in-law Scipio intervenes and prevents Tiberius from being sent back to the Numantines. However, the relationship between Scipio and Tiberius sours as Scipio refuses to recognise the treaty Tiberius struck with the Numantines. Again, the senatory class thinks that the treaty is an insult to Rome. This causes some extreme tension between Scipio and Tiberius, as Tiberius is basically left dishonoured by the fact that he can't maintain this treaty with the Numantines. So already Tiberius is being outcast from the established elite. However, he's already begun to gain the love of the people, and this trend would continue for the rest of his life. Tiberius Gracchus has just arrived back in Rome, and he's been given a hero's greeting by the people of Rome. Now, the people view him as a hero because he has just saved their menfolk from being utterly butchered by a Hispanic tribe in the Roman province of Hispania. However, the treaty that he makes with this Hispanic tribe is absolutely despised by the Roman Senate. In the Roman Senate's eyes, this treaty has made Rome look weak, and they want to send Tiberius back to Spain to basically punish him for making such a treaty. Through family connections, Tiberius has managed to not be sent back to Spain and is now basically disgraced by the fact that he can't withhold this treaty which he made with the Hispanic people. Anyway, Tiberius decides to leave the city of Rome and head to the country just to clear his thoughts and figure out what his next step is. His ultimate goal in life, after all, had been to become a senator like his father. This is now no longer possible as Tiberius is in disgrace and his honour stops him from running for a senatory position. So, wanting to gather his thoughts, he heads towards the countryside. However, upon leaving Rome, he sees this long trail of poor Romans with carts holding all of their belongings heading towards the city. Now, this isn't unusual. Rome usually has an influx of poor people heading towards the city, as Rome is a very rich city, and these poor people want to go to Rome to make their fortune. However, this is an extremely large number of poor Romans heading towards the city, so Tiberius simply brushes it off as just an unusual occurrence. So Tiberius heads towards the country, and upon arriving in the countryside, it doesn't quite look right. There should be small farms farmed by small families. However, there's large plantations instead, being worked by what looks like slave labour. Asking around, Tiberius eventually finds out why there are no small holdings anymore in the country, and it's all to do with the fact that the rich elite have developed this very successful get-rich scheme. So when these poor farmers went off to fight in Rome's wars, as after all you need to be a Roman property owner to qualify to be in the army, they left their farms unattended. And as a result, these farms gradually produced less and less profit, to the point where the family left behind eventually declared bankruptcy. This is where the rich elite, like vultures, would descend on this farm. Due to this farm now being essentially bankrupt, the rich elite would buy this farm on behalf of a fake family that they just made up for an insanely small price. They then displaced this family by simply not employing them to work the land. They instead used cheap slave labour. This is why Tiberius had seen so many poor Romans heading towards the city of Rome with all their belongings, as simply put, they had nowhere else to go. They couldn't work the farms anymore because their farms had essentially been stolen from them by the rich elite, and they need money, otherwise they are going to starve to death. Angered by this, Tiberius actually finds his calling in the plight of these people. He has, after all, been fighting for the Senate and people of Rome, not just the Senate, and he's utterly disgusted by the way that his own class is acting towards these poor people. He despises this get-rich-quick scheme and decides that he's going to try and help these people. However, he's not quite sure how he's going to do that, and it eventually occurs to him to run for the office of tribune. Now, the office of tribune is an extremely sacred and important office in the Roman Republic. So the office of tribune was originally set up in order to prevent the rich elite from profiting off of the plight of the poor. So they would do this by essentially giving the tribunes a special power called a veto. Now, the tribunes were meant to use this veto to stop the rich from gaining too much power through the legal system, and as a result they would help protect the people from the rich. This is all well and good until Rome becomes extremely wealthy, and as Rome becomes extremely wealthy, the rich also become extremely wealthy, as they are funding the wars which enable Rome to become wealthy, and they are having a massive return on their investment. So with this money, they are able to bribe the tribunes to let laws that would benefit them through, as opposed to stopping the laws that would benefit them. This means that when Tiberius actually runs for the office of tribune, promising to give the people back their land, the senators brush it off, thinking that, oh, we can just bribe him as we always do. They won't actually get their land back and will continue making lots and lots of money. However, Tiberius is stoic in his beliefs, and he is not going to be bribed so easily. And furthermore, he doesn't just plan to protect the poor from the rich, but he actually plans on actually helping the poor get back their land. Arriving back from war, the young Tiberius Gracchus returns to a Rome he does not recognise. Where once his men of the legion farmed, now slaves work the land for rich noblemen in vast plantations. And his men and their family are now penniless and without a home. Tiberius takes it upon himself to fight for the people against his very own class, the rich noblemen, and restore their land to them. Tiberius decides to run for the office of tribune, an office which is meant to curb the power of rich noblemen of Rome, which has since been corrupted. Tiberius, however, finds allies in the Senate, sympathetic to the plight of the common people. You see, Tiberius isn't the only person of his class to think that the increase in wealth among the nobility is a bad thing. Many people think that it is causing a problem in the Roman Republic. Tiberius eventually marries one of his more prominent allies' daughter, and together they begin to formulate a plan and a law indeed, to get the poor back their land. Using this as a campaign slogan, Tiberius is elected to the office of tribune. Having secured the office of tribune, Tiberius begins to formulate his law, and he actually comes up with a logical reason as to why this law should get through the Senate. You see, Tiberius's law makes perfect sense on paper. The more people who own property, the larger the tax harvest is. It also increases the recruiting pool, as you need to be a property owner to join the Roman military. He also includes an incentive for the noblemen to give up their land and give it back to the poor, saying that they will be compensated for this loss of income. The Roman Senate, however, is mainly made up of these rich noblemen, and as a result, they do not want this law to get through the Senate. This will essentially cut all of their income in half, and they don't want that. They have spent lots of money trying to buy this land, and they don't want to just lose it, as it's a form of income for them, and it is also making them a lot of money. So as a result, they don't really let Tiberius's law get to the Senate. Tiberius, therefore, needs to think out of the box if he wants this law to pass at all. Now, being a tribune means that you get to preside over the People's Assembly. This is essentially where laws can be passed through the people. Now, there are multiple tribunes that are elected because the role of keeping the rich noblemen in check is actually quite a big one. So Tiberius decides that he's going to try and get his law passed through the People's Assembly. However, as I stated before, the office of tribune is extremely corrupt at this stage. The rich noblemen have the other tribunes completely under their thumb. They are bribing them. One of these tribunes is a man called Octavius. Now, Octavius is again from a nobleman's family. He is one of the people that own these vast property estates. So anyway, when Tiberius asks for the People's Assemblies to be open so that they can pass laws, Octavius vetoes this. The veto is the power that the tribune has to stop laws getting through the Senate that will directly affect the people. This means that today at least, Tiberius can't push his law through the People's Assembly, and as long as Octavian remains vetoing his plea to open up the public assembly for vote, he will not get his law through. This is where Tiberius most likely breaks the law. He actually orders Octavius to be removed from the public assembly. Now, in Rome, if you hold an office in the Senate, be it tribune, consul, any kind of office, you are protected, you are legally immune, and you also can't be touched. So Tiberius has Octavius removed forcibly, thus breaking the law which says that a tribune cannot be forcibly removed or touched or harmed in any sort of way. Tiberius justifies this by saying that Octavius isn't defending the rights of the people and therefore shouldn't really be treated as a tribune. However, Tiberius knows in the back of his head that Octavius is just going to return tomorrow and the exact same thing is going to happen again and again and again. So how is he going to get his law through the public assembly? How is he going to stop the other tribunes who are also being bribed by the Senate from stopping his law getting to the public assembly in the future? Tiberius comes up on the spot with a radical solution. Following Octavius's removal, the public assembly then begins its day-to-day affairs, asking the tribunes to open up the public buildings. So, the law courts are asked to open. Tiberius stands up and says no, veto. He's effectively stopped the law courts from opening for today. They then ask that the public treasury is opened, to which Tiberius stands up and says no, veto. So the treasury can't be accessed for today. This goes on and on and on, and essentially over a matter of weeks, Tiberius grounds the productivity of Rome to a complete standstill. He's effectively holding Rome hostage with his tribune veto powers. Forced by the economic factor of the fact that Rome's economy isn't moving because nothing is opened, because Tiberius has said they cannot open, the Roman Senate eventually caves in and agrees to back Tiberius's bill. Only then does Tiberius decide that the law courts can open and the public treasury can be opened. This doesn't make him a popular person. It makes him a very popular person with the people, but remember, the rich noblemen have the power. They are in charge of the running of the state. And through his actions, Tiberius has made a lot of political enemies. With Tiberius's land reform finally through the elite aristocratic Senate of Rome, he could finally set to work righting the wrongs done by the aristocrats to the poor Roman citizens. Tiberius set up a commission to carry out the reforms and ensure it would be enforced, unlike previous land reforms. This commission was made up exclusively of supporters of the reform, such as his father-in-law who had helped craft the legislation and Tiberius's brother, Gaius Gracchus. However, the anger at the reform within the Senate remained, with the elite senators taking every chance to hamper, delay, and slander Tiberius. Things would start to get ugly in the Roman Senate when Attalus III of Pergamon died, leaving his entire kingdom to Rome. Tiberius jumped on this opportunity, quickly using his powers as tribune to get the wealth from the inherited lands to be used for implementing his new law. This caused outrage in the Senate, as this should have been a job for the Senate to decide where the money would go. With this, a damning rumour began circulating around the Roman Senate, that Tiberius had been presented with a royal crown and purple robe from an ambassador from Pergamon, as the ambassador believed that Tiberius would soon be the king of Rome. A meddler in the elite's affairs was one thing, but there was one thing that all Romans feared more than change, which was a return to monarchy. Convinced that Tiberius was gaining too much power as tribune, the elite senators began to plunge into paranoia. Was Tiberius really trying to make himself king? He certainly had the support of the people. If he did, they would surely support him. What would Tiberius do next? Was he going to replace them with the stinking plebeians? Was he going to put on the purple robes and the crown that had supposedly been given to him, and go from defender of the people of Rome to the king of the people of Rome? The Senate of Rome began making plans to deal with Tiberius. They quickly came to the conclusion that his overuse of his tribunal veto powers had been illegal. There were other crimes that they could also have him arrested for, most noticeably the use of force against a tribune for his own gains. But what worried the Senate even more is that a group of veterans had begun to act as Tiberius's personal bodyguards. Tiberius had ensured the loyalty of these men by getting them back their lands. It was increasingly beginning to look like Tiberius was preparing to take that purple toga and crown presented to him by the ambassador from Pergamon and make himself king. Tiberius, knowing that the Senate was most likely going to try and arrest him, after his tribuneship was over, began preparing for re-election to the office for 132 BC. However, he still had the forcible removal of his fellow tribune, Octavius, hanging over him. So, Tiberius had to come up with a solution to convince the people what he had done was legal. Tiberius argued that other offices or professions in the Roman system could dismiss members if they violated their duties, with the most noticeable example being that of the Vestal Virgins. This excuse seemed to work with the people, but not so much for the Senate. Even Tiberius's own supporters in the Senate were beginning to become wary of how much power the young man was beginning to wield. Then, out of the blue, a close friend of Tiberius died suddenly. Rumours started going around Rome that the man had been poisoned. Fingers silently began pointing towards the elite senatorial class. Tiberius took this opportunity to show his grief publicly. Dressing in mourning clothes with his children in front of the plebeian assembly, He pleaded with them to protect him and his children, with even more veterans rushing to join his bodyguard. Rome stood on a knife's edge. The people were behind Tiberius. What would happen next would have a drastic effect on Roman history. Tiberius, the man once honoured with being the first Roman over the walls of Carthage, prepared himself as he set out for the long and dangerous walk up the Capitoline Hill. His plan was to get re-elected as tribune. This way he could continue reforming the Roman Republic. Already he had promised to shorten the term of military service, and even more drastically, give Roman allies Roman citizenship. However, Tiberius needed the powers that the office of tribune held. Without the protection of the office, Tiberius could potentially be arrested for breaking the law after he forcibly removed another tribune from power. As he made his way up the Capitoline Hill, a small street fight broke out as Tiberius' supporters attempted to block a group of his political opponents from entering the area. It was then a sympathetic senator, a certain Fluvius Gracchus, managed to wriggle his way through the crowd towards Tiberius. Shouting over the noise of the crowd, Gracchus informed Tiberius that the elite senators were plotting to kill him, having already armed their slaves. In response to this, Tiberius' veteran bodyguards began to arm themselves with clubs and staves. Shouting over the din, Tiberius gestured towards his head, saying that if his life was in danger, this was the sign he would use. The group of men Tiberius' supporters had been trying to block entrance to saw this signal and, in a panic, rushed back to the Senate building, believing that this was the signal for his men to bring him the royal crown. Tiberius was planning to make himself king. When this news made it to the Senate, the elite erupted in anger. A cousin of Tiberius, Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasca, started screaming in disgust that Tiberius wanted to make himself king. Nasca then demanded the consul take action against this, which the consul refused to do. Then, in absolute disgust at what was happening, Nasca pulled his toga over his head and started walking out of the Senate door, shouting, "Now that the consul has betrayed the state, let every man who wishes to uphold the laws follow me!" And with that, a frenzied Senate left the Senate building and headed towards Tiberius. Tearing apart benches as they went, finding anything they could use as weapons, the frenzied senators rushed up the Capitoline Hill towards their target, the meddling, so-called defender of the people, Tiberius Gracchus. The scene that followed was to be unprecedented in Rome. Tiberius' supporters quickly realised what was going on and tried to form a barrier between the frenzied senators and their hero. However, the senators quickly battered their way through the crowd as first blood was drawn. Some of the planks they had torn from the benches still had the nails in them, and soon, what was meant to be a peaceful, normal election in Rome turned into a bloodbath. Tiberius rushed to escape along with a few of his supporters. However, he did not get very far before he was cornered by several senators. In a fury, the senators beat the defender of the people mercilessly. The first blow came none other than from Tiberius' fellow tribune, smashing his piece of bench against his fellow tribune's head. Tiberius fell to his knees as the battering continued. Soon he laid motionless on the floor in a pool of his own blood. The defender of the people was dead. This didn't stop the frenzied senators though. The massacre continued, with vicious fights occurring in the streets between Tiberius' supporters trying to rescue their hero's body and the blood-crazed senators. By the end of the day, more than 300 people lay dead in the streets of Rome, every single one of them beaten to death. Not every single person died from the sword. Every single death had been caused by being battered to death with blunt objects. Wanting to prove a point, the senators then found Tiberius' dead and mangled body and hurled the lifeless corpse into the river Tiber, denying the defender of the people a proper funeral, and thus denying him access into the afterlife. This was repeated with several key supporters of Tiberius, and soon the river Tiber was the unceremonial grave of hundreds. Tiberius set out to change the Roman world for the good of the people. Few could have predicted that his actions would result in the first ever recorded incident of civil strife in the Roman Republic. Thanks for watching and listening to our video. If you like the channel, consider subscribing to Ancient History Guy. Or, if you really like the channel, head on over to our Patreon feed. There, for as little as $1 a month, you can gain access to exclusive documentaries, behind-the-scenes footage, and videos before they're live on YouTube. All sources are listed and linked in the description below. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe. I've been the Ancient History Guy, and as always, I'll be seeing you later.